Can IT provide Sean with a phone number to call in real quick? He's got it.
Little pieces of paper you can write yes, no, and just hold them up as we go through.
Sort of brevity. So the default is kind of muting off in order to keep from having a lot of interference or background noise. But one little trick or tool that I encourage you all to use is to use your space bar like a walkie-talkie key. When you press it down, it'll unmute, and when you let it go, it'll mute again.
I'm here.
Great. Okay. Thanks, Sean. With that, let's. I'm going to go ahead and start the roundtable special meeting, the City Council roundtable on May 11th, 2020. Jody, could you please take roll call?
Yes. Councilmember Jeans,
Here.
Councilmember Ross,
Here.
Councilmember Holloway,
Here.
Councilmember Mayhew. He is not yet in attendance. Councilmember Lassay, Councilmember Sundwall,
Here.
Councilmember Shepherd, Councilmember Shepherd,
Councilmember Shepherd, if you could unmute, please.
I was trying. I was press this and press that, and it wasn't working. So yes, I'm here.
thank you, and Mayor Larson.
I am here. Thank you. So with that, without further ado, well, I'll entertain a motion to excuse Councilmembers Mayhew and Lassay. I don't know that any of us heard from them, so maybe they're just running late.
So moved.
Any 1 second?
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to excuse Councilmembers Mayhew and Lassay. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
No.
No.
They're here.
One me. All right. All right. With that, I'll turn it over to Robert to kick off. As council might recall, we're kind of in that Venn diagram where we've gone through, ways to well, first of all, identifying that we have an ongoing sustainable budget issue facing us in the general fund, and the primary buckets or strategies is either looking at economic development, levels of service or costs, or additional revenues and fees such as taxes and fees. So we're still wrapping up the levels of service one, and did police and fire at the last roundtable, and so Robert's picking it up from there on the other departments. So with that, I'll turn it over to Robert. And for the record, may it be noted that Councilmember Mayhew has joined us.
First of all, I just want to make sure everybody can hear me. If you could raise your hand, just because it's the first time I've used the Zoom in this platform. Perfect.
Councilman Lassay has joined us as well.
Okay, so tonight we're going to continue the level of service discussions by department. We're going to go over the leadership first, which is the mayor, city council, city clerk, and then administrative services, which would cover human resources, events, and communications, and then finance, community development, and IT. In leadership, I'll just run down these slides really fast.
Well, Robert, I just want to do one more kind of point of order.
Yeah.
For those that just late joined, again, one tip to make things easy so we don't get a lot of background noise is to keep yourself on mute when you want to speak. Just use your space bar like a walkie-talkie key. Hold it down to unmute. When you let go of it, it'll mute you again. Also, if you note at the bottom of your screen is the participants. If you press on participants, a list of all the names come up. In the bottom right corner of that box where the participants is, there's a button that says raise hand. When someone's doing a presentation, unfortunately, I can't see all of the council members in particular, or staff, or anyone that might have a question. So if you remember, just please use that as a means of raising your hand too, in case I can't see you in the video. I'll scroll back and forth and try and keep an eye on you, but please use that if you can. Thank you.
Okay, and how I'll do this tonight is I will break for questions at the end of each section on the ones I present, and we'll go from there. So I'll go ahead and start with the leadership, and if Mayor and Rick want to chime in at any time, please do. Otherwise, I'll go down through the slides. So the City Council represents the citizens of Snoqualmie, provides guidance, leadership, and direction to their government in a manner that best serves the needs as expressed through the democratic process. And also that's through the policy implementation and the vision of the citizens as well through the legislative process. City Clerk ensures transparency and community access in the legislative process. Right now, there's 4.0 FTEs. The City Council and Mayor together has been counted as 1 FTE based on historical practice with the city. So that would be included in that 4 total. Right now, that includes the City Administrator, Assistants to City Administrator, and City Clerk. You might recall in the past, we actually had the City Administrator housed under the Administrative Services budget. We're actually, internally, we're breaking that out this year. It's not going to impact anything you see on the budget ordinance because the budget ordinance had all the administrative departments, including finance, into 1 department. But just for our internal purposes, we're including the City Administrator back in the leadership budget rather than the Administrative Services Department budget. And so you can see the organizational chart, citizens of Snoqualmie, and these are approved positions. They said the Mayor, Council, then you see City Administrator, City Clerk, and Executive Assistant position, which currently is vacant. Core services. So again, the council provides legislative oversight and policymaking, supports city constituents by fostering their connection to government. Mayor and the city administrator serve as the chief executive of the city, provide leadership and oversight over department functions, serve as a city representative in legislative affairs and intergovernmental relations, implement the goals and objectives of the city council through the entire organization. City clerk manages the legislative affairs of the city, responsible for records management, provides administrative support to elected officials, serves also as the city's volunteer coordinator, and the city clerk function also provides the oversight of the city's risk management and insurance program. And measures, again, this is kind of a tricky one to come up with, and this is a work in progress on measures. So as we go through the budget process, these are subject to change going forward. We could add measures at this point. This is just something that we were able to track through the past. And you can see number of agenda bills, 2014, there were 253. I think a lot of them were development related and planning related. 2019, they're down to approximately 153. Number of public records requests have gone up during that period. You can see 2016, there were 37. 2019, there were 133. And that doesn't include police. That's just the agenda bills or records requests that go directly to the administration. Any questions on the leadership slides at all? Okay, I'll go ahead and hand it over to Deborah.
Okay. Good evening, council and staff. So I'll just start with a description of the Administrative Services Department. The Administrative Services Department is made up of several divisions: Human Resources, Communications, Human Services, and Events. Each division plays an important role in the department's mission of striving to provide excellent services for the city's employees and citizens. The next slide, Robert.
Robert, are you going to the next slide?
Thank you. So this is the organizational chart for the positions that are in the department, which consists of the different divisions that I just noted. The Administrative Services Director is the head of the department, and then we have a Human Resources Analyst and a Management Analyst. Within the department, we have a Communications Program. The Communications Manager oversees the communications assistant in that division. And then we have our events coordinator who oversees the events. Next slide, Robert. Thank you. Some of the functions of the core services of the Human Resources Department is for providing human resources-based services and facilitating growth in the city through the efficient management of resources and processes. In addition, we strive to develop and maintain high-quality personnel resources to manage the city's operations with integrity and efficiency. Some of the examples of what the Human Resources Department does is recruiting and hiring, making sure there's diversity and equal opportunity, onboarding and offboarding, new hires, onboarding, offboarding individuals that are leaving, benefits administration for several different benefits that the city has, health benefits, retirement benefits, etc., like an HRA plan. And then employee relations and employee recognition, labor relations. I'll speak to the unions that we have in the city. Employment law, compensation and classification, civil service program management, safety are part of those. The city currently has approximately 120 FTE employees. We have the management and professional group, along with 3 union groups, the International Association of Firefighters Local Number 2878, the Snoqualmie Police Association, and the Teamsters Local Number 763. Our employment priorities are to provide a healthy work environment, employee well-being, and support of personal and professional growth. Next slide, Robert. Thank you. For our communications program, they are the representative of the city, our public information officer. As such, Joan builds active partnerships with stakeholders throughout the valley from Duval to North Bend, such as other PIOs, communications managers at the school district and human services organizations, and the Snoqualmie Valley Historical Museum, along with the Snoqualmie tribe for special projects such as the Boardwalk Kiosk. For media relations, proactive outreach to local media and to regional media for larger issues, with the Valley Record having fewer and fewer reporters. Staff has had to carefully educate them with background context on issues. That doesn't always work, but the community also has Living Snoqualmie, which has a very large readership. Two-way communications. Social media followers are growing, as you can see on the chart on this slide. Excuse me. The city info email inbox, receives approximately 30 inquiries per week, which are either answered by Joan and Gail or forwarded to the appropriate person or city department for a response. Our communications program staff is also looking into other civic engagement platforms as set forth in the council goals and objectives. On the horizon, they strive to continue to work on council goals and objectives, expanding communication channels and methods as time allows, particularly video. There is a discussion on starting a blog, which would allow quicker dissemination of news prior to a formal news release or web content. An example would be a council decision that could be communicated that evening. The city will have a free website redesign available through our vendor in about a year, which we can choose to do or not. Some of our materials could use an update for look and feel, such as items included in our resident welcome kits, the newsletter, direct mailers, and other items. Currently, we use SurveyMonkey, but are open to other platforms. The most exciting thing that Joan is looking forward to is potentially creating a public information commission, as recommended by Laura Snyder in a public engagement report completed in 2019. Appointed members would represent their networks to help us reach residents that speak other languages, to engage vulnerable populations, and include a high school student to support the council goal of engaging youth in our community. That commission could be an ongoing focus group for city communication initiatives. Next slide, Robert. Okay, events, outreach, and marketing. Nicole's work involves planning, and Nicole Wiebe, sorry, we have two Nicoles. Nicole Wiebe's work involves planning and managing events, activating the community, partnerships, and economic vitality. This gives you an example of, just the kind of things that she does. She also oversees the special events permits that people apply for when they come in. They turn those in if they want to have an event at a park or something, and she provides those. I think Sean's also very familiar with that. When he has an event, he has to fill out an application, and then Nicole takes that in and she sends that out to staff to review and approve or make comments. Next slide, Robert. Okay, this slide is focused on measurables. And so in 2018, the event attendance overall was 7,300 plus at 15 different events. Some of the new events that Nicole brought to us or helped bring to us was the Snoqualmie Winter Lights. We had the holiday Christmas, the holiday tree lighting. And she expanded, and we ended up having the Snoqualmie Winter Lights, which seemed to be very well received by the citizens of Snoqualmie and some of the visitors that she found out came in for that. Also the drive-in at Dirtfish, the big truck day, the Chalk the Block event, and again, the Snoqualmie Winter Lights. Regional visitors from different King County cities, as well as the I-5 corridor from Arlington to Olympia attended. And she received some emails, some input, and that's how she knows that, that they came from other places such as the ones listed. In 2020, we've had a change because of the COVID situation. So events may be different in the sense of being smaller with social distancing, maybe being outdoors versus indoors. Examples would be the all drive-in movies, a smaller Chalk the Block, farmers market with the social distancing. And we're very hopeful that the Snoqualmie Winter Lights will happen again, of course, with the social distancing. Next slide, Robert. Human services. Excuse me. I know all of the current council members and mayor are familiar with the human services process. The current advisory committee consists of Sarah Weasel, Carol Peterson, Ann Lugelin, and the staff liaisons are Carson Hornsby and myself, Deborah Vigil. Council liaison is James Mayhew. The strategic plan was created a couple of years ago. It has our goals and objectives, human services funding in comparable cities, and we took a look at past funding requests and allocations. Excuse me. The application process is what starts out, it's on we have something on our website that shows that we're intaking applications for human services funding. We receive those applications, and that's where the advisory committee comes in, and they review and score those applications and then make a recommendation to council as to what the allocation, what the funding should be for each organization that has applied. Those that are approved for funding receive a services agreements. It's an agreement for services that they provide for the city or to the citizens. And in order to continue to receive the funding that they have been approved for, they have to complete an accountability form. And that happens twice a year. So they've already filled out the first one for the first part of 2020. And next month, they will be receiving another accountability form asking them to complete that for the second half of their funding for 2020. So the funding in 2019 was approved, the funding that was approved was a total of $225,327. The total for 2020 that was approved is $232,287. There are 15 nonprofit organizations that were approved for this funding. They consist of the Eastside Baby Corner, Encompass, Friends of Youth, LifeWire, Mama's Hands, Mount Si Senior Center, Skyview Community Foundation, Society of St. Vincent de Paul, Snoqualmie Valley Alliance Church for the CarePoint Clinic, Snoqualmie Valley Community Network, Snoqualmie Valley Food Bank, Snoqualmie Valley Shelter Services, Snoqualmie Valley Indoor Playground, the Trail Youth, and Two Rivers School. We have ongoing communication and promotion for the human services funding. And this year is a little bit different because of the COVID situation. We are looking at emergency funding for the human services organizations. The chart that you see on this, excuse me, on this slide will show you the prioritization that is used when the advisory committee is scoring the applications and having their discussions. It was determined that what was most important was food to eat and a roof overhead. So 40% of the funding available went for that purpose. The next one was supporting and preparing youth for success. 30% went for that purpose. A safe haven from violence and abuse, 15% went towards that. And the last one is physical and mental wellness and healthy aging. And 15% of the funding went towards that purpose. So that's all I have for the Administrative Services Department. Are there any questions? Thank you.
Okay, next is finance. And so the finance department manages and protects the financial resources entrusted to the city by the community. The finance department provides support to all city departments on fiscal related issues, as well as providing staff support to city council on fiscal related items. The approved FTEs this year were 10, but I'm going to show you the organizational chart here. You'll notice there's actually 9 on the organizational chart. I decided the middle of last year not to fill the approved receptionist position. This was the person that used to work at the front counter, was a temporary employee. If you remember during the budget, it was approved to go to a permanent employee position. we decided not to fill that position, and that's indefinitely right now. So I did take it off the organization chart. So core services, we prepare annual financial reports, maintain compliance with BAR's requirements, which is the state budget and accounting reporting system, and facilitate the annual audit review. We prepare the biennial budget and capital improvement plan, conduct long-range financial planning, and provide the analysis necessary to drive sound financial decision-making. That includes cost-benefit analysis, special projects, both for council and for other departments and staff, and analyzing items such as grants and state and federal funding that comes in. The finance department also serves as the city treasurer, manages all cash and investments, and oversees the issuance of debt. Finance also manages utility billing, business license, and all city collected taxes, oversees citywide payroll and payments to vendors, maintains internal controls and ensures compliance with internal policies. For several years now, we've been the front counter for the, so to speak, for the city. When you call the 888-1555 number at City Hall during normal business hours and normal business practices, obviously not right now, you're going to get unfortunately going to get a message most of the time. We're the switchboard of the city, so we've been directing all the calls to other departments. So that's part of what the department has been doing. And another thing I did not, that I should have added on here is that we also maintain the financial management or the enterprise resource program on the finance side for the city. So where IT does the architecture, we actually do the management and training of the actual financial modules and system. 2019 measures, this was very difficult for us to prepare, and I have some ideas going into the future. We've processed approximately 5,000 invoices annually. Approximately 1,338 active business license. They're maintained for many businesses with quarterly reporting for B&O that we handle. We have 5,561 active utility accounts with monthly billing, and our last Standard & Poor's utility bond rating was AA in 2018. And that's all I have for finance, unless there's any more questions. Okay, hearing none, I will turn this over to Mark Hoffman in Community Development.
Good evening. Thank you, Mayor and Council. Yes, Mayor.
Councilman Sunwell had a question.
Sorry, I'm a little bit late. I didn't exactly know where one was going to end, one was going to start. I'm curious on the on Deborah's presentation and some of the other presentations. We've had an idea of what would, if we had to make cuts, these are the types of consequences associated with having to make cuts in this particular area. And I'm just curious, were there any slides on that, or is that coming later? We're wrapping up toward the end of these presentations, I think, and that what I'd like to have a better idea of is where we have wiggle room, if any.
Councilmember Sundwell, I almost said Councilmember Sean.
That works.
I can get that information to you later.
Yeah, obviously, just make sure you send it to everybody.
Of course.
Okay, community development. Thank you. This introductory slide is two things. One, it's the CD department mission, which continues to be as follows: as stewards of Snoqualmie's vision for long-term growth, community character, and economic vitality, the Community Development Department provides quality public service in municipal planning, building, code enforcement, and economic development to internal and external customers to secure Snoqualmie's future as a livable, inspiring, vibrant, and equitable community. So based on that mission for the department, we're currently budgeted with 8 FTEs in 2019 going into 2020. There is a footnote on this slide. Currently, one of our senior planners is a 60-40 split with Parks and Public Works, and 40% is reimbursed through utilities. So it's a 0.6 FTE in the budget for community development, 0.4 for planning, but we're showing it as 8. Next slide, Robert. In 2014, 2015, the existing planning department and building departments were merged into one to form one community development department. Through retirements, 2 existing department head positions were merged into one. The planning manager and the building official were the retirees. We still have a building official and it's a management MOU, but it's not a department head level. Our organization chart currently shows that the director supervises a building division on your left and a planning division on your right. In the building division, we have the building official who's under the management MOU, 1 building inspector, and 1 permit technician who is the face accepting permits there at the front counter. In the planning division, there's 2 senior planners. One is the 60-40 split with a focus on advanced planning. The other senior planner position has a focus on current planning, project review. Last year, we added an assistant planner position through enhancements, and we had the planning technician who is also the front desk face for the planning division. Next slide, Robert. For core community development service categories, the bulleted items on the slide inform, that's a copy of our current comprehensive plan. For advanced planning, it generally consists of comprehensive plan and future land use maps, master plans, vision plans, regional planning, King County and multi-county, countywide planning policies, growth targets, urban growth, boundaries, annexations. Current planning is more project development applications. It generally consists of development review and permitting, municipal code implementation, zoning map, zoning implementation, floodplain ordinance, community rating system for flood insurance, shoreline, critical areas, SEPA, and so forth. Building consists of permitting and plan review, inspections, building codes, building safety. Code enforcement fire marshal is primarily the role of the building official and the director, involves interpretation and enforcement of Snoqualmie municipal codes and the fire code. Economic development, business attraction, retention, expansion, workforce, tourism, marketing, with a focus on the Economic Development Commission and the Lodging Tax Advisory Commission. The last one is grants administration. We have a very talented grants writer in our department, Nicole Sanders. And those duties include grant applications, research, administration, and coordination. Next slide, please. On this slide, the other way, 2019 measures. We came up with some measurable metrics. Building permits issued, 506. Other permits, which include variances, master plans, conditional use permits, 46. A key metric is number of grants and grant reimbursements, which for 2019 are nearing $1 million. And also the flood program and house raisings. One note on this slide of metrics that aren't there, because community development is fundamentally different from other departments like police and fire. Here's an added comment on potential additional metrics. A lot of what we do, common activities, are often cited but not displayed here as measurements. They're very difficult and time consuming to track. For instance, total email contacts, phone calls, in-person drop-ins at City Hall, site visits, code enforcement cases. The activity of tracking each individual item, tabulating it, and ensuring accuracy as a metric could involve more time than the task itself. So a lot of the day-to-day activities don't show in these metrics, but we're continuing to explore other metrics we could use to measure activity. Next slide, please. This slide is the 2019 expenditures for the CD department. You'll see 42% cover personnel. Supplies, services, and contracts is 4%. Interfund service charges are 22%, and that leaves 32% as reimbursable expenditures. The summary of that is project reviews. As new development comes in, they enter into a memorandum of understanding for reimbursement. And this pays for staff time spent reviewing those new projects, but also the time and effort of our third-party independent consultants that the city contracts with. They invoice the city, and the city is reimbursed by the applicant. And then my last slide, please. Along the lines of Councilmember Sunwell's comment, these three statements are intended to address that. The Community Development Department core services are mandated by government policies and regulations at the federal, state, regional, and local level. Development review timelines are codified, and many other deadline expectations are service-oriented, like timely responding to inquiries, phone calls, physical drop-in visits, and other high-performance service expectations of a community like Snoqualmie. The second statement is reductions to CD department resources would negatively affect the city's ability to timely perform these core services with direct negative impacts on mandated timelines. The final statement is that the CD department has the resources it needs to weather the current crisis, maintain levels of core service, and assist the city and Snoqualmie community endure and recover. And thank you. The last slide is the obligatory question slide.
Mark, I think we discussed this before. I appreciate the pie chart with, kind of indicating if you were to cut some growth activity, for example, a lot of revenue might disappear with that too. Were you able to ever do any kind of that sussing out what I was talking about in terms of what percent of the community development department or even the building department's activity is related to regulatory mandates versus activity that's that can be happen or not, based on council or administration decisions. In other words, if a development happens, state doesn't mandate any kind of approval of developments from a, well, I guess the people have property rights.
Yeah, in looking at that slide with all the core services, development review is only one. So we have the reimbursables that are essentially cost recovery, and then some personnel costs. But then in looking through the updated list of all the activities that we're covering, I was hard pressed to find any category that's not mandated by some government policy or regulation. And so the clear mandates are that you must find a development application complete within 28 days. Within 180 days, we shall hold a public meeting and so forth. Those are clean mandates within development review, but whether it's growth targets, comp plan updates, lodging tax, they're all mandated to some level, either by the policy or regulation from federal on down to the city. So whether you're talking about the Snoqualmie Municipal Code, the state regulations in RCW or WAC, the regional commitments in countywide planning policies, or even federal programs and grants, they're all mandated by government at some level. And so the discussion becomes really how, if you're going to cut any, what are the bare minimum project reviews or revenue sources that you absolutely must do pare down? And then the rest, I would not characterize as a luxury. For instance, economic development. I don't view that as a luxury that's cuttable, but they're different categories. They don't apply neatly to a singular mandate.
Yeah, because it occurs to me there's a lot of activity. I was thinking of others like the comp plan updates, GMA updates, shoreline master plans, even complying with FEMA on an annual update to, what measures we're taking in order to keep a high community rating system that affects insurance rates, code enforcement across the board, and meeting growth targets, like you said, which we've more than done. So I don't think the county others would be our case if we decided to stop more residential development or even much. But then we would still, I assume, have, to your point, an issue with at least properties that are are within the city boundary having the right, if they're meeting the codes, to come forward and develop just because they have land use rights and we have to comply with those rights, or at least respond to those rights.
Correct. Any property owner can avail themselves of the application process. There are mandates for how long we take to review them, when to issue them, what different levels, which require planning commission, city council, and the CD department is the caretaker of those mandates. And it varies from time to time. Even in a slowdown or crisis like this, we're seeing a huge demand for inspections and calls, interpretations, clarifications, frustrations. And so it's not that if we're heading into a slowdown like 2007, 2008, that those requirements stop. They just kind of change and still become mandates, but there's just not as many. Or you get a situation like a mill site project that is just of a certain caliber. And even though it's one application for a master plan, it shows on a metric as one, it involves months and months and years of work. And so the metrics aren't clear cut in that regard.
Ross.
So over the past 15 years, obviously Snoqualmie Ridge is growing a lot. And I'm curious, have you maintained the same number of FTEs in your community development department and used more outside contractors, or have you reduced the number of FTEs because we're no longer growing as much?
One of the slides we had last week that I was hoping would be in the slide deck had FTE counts for each department from 2013 to 2020. And you'll see for community development, that rode at 7 until last year where it rose to 8. It dropped to 7 in the consolidation. We kept it at 7 for the last budget and then funded the assistant planner. So it's back at historic levels with 8. But in the big picture, with Snoqualmie Ridge 1 and 2 being master plan communities, the majority of that work involved consultants, project reviews, civil review, and those contracts have been updated, but it's still the case. The idea being that you have these 2 large master plan communities that'll be built out someday. What size community development department staff do you need to facilitate that? That stayed at 7 or 8 in first in 2 departments, now in 1. So the level stayed the same. But the idea was that when you reach build out for SR1 and SR2, you don't need those consultants anymore. And if those were FTEs, you'd be in a position where you don't need that level of review. The FTEs aren't needed, but the model has been long before I got here that when the work dries up, the consultants go away. And so you're seeing that now. We're at our general level of community development FTEs, but you're reaching build out on both those 2 master plan projects. And if we don't have a mill site or an annexation of the urban growth area, there will be little to no need for that level of consultant review.
Any other questions, council? Thank you, Mark.
Thank you.
And next is Kevin Smith with IT.
Good evening, Robert. Yeah, there we go. So my organization provides all the core services that enable the city to function, be that email, network, phone, application support, platform technologies. We also purchase and set up the hardware for all the employees as well as city council. And we provide the GIS system, geographic information system for the city. And we work very hard to respond in a timely manner to issues that are raised to us via our ticketing system, via email or via phone, or if someone happens to stop by, we try to be available for them as well. At the same time, we serve for the city of Duval. We provide 3/5 of a head, 24 hours a week for supporting their IT needs and their project requirements. Next slide, Robert. So some of these measures are a little bit sparse. I hope to increase those and make them a little more meaningful in the future. But our server uptime metrics are fairly good at 98.9%. That and most of our applications that we run in-house. Springbrook is one of the bigger applications we run, as well as the planning software for the city development and city planner. Workstation uptime and availability is 99.86%. That's a little dubious considering the number of issues we've had over the year, intermittent issues that affected wide swaths of our population. I hope to get a little bit better metrics on this in the coming year with some better measures. Our network, our 2 network uptimes, those are third-party providers who give us our internet access outside of the city, not necessarily our inside of our city network. And both of those, our third-party providers are doing very well at 99%. And then here's a metric I want to make a little more meaty for the future, which is number of service requests closed. Doesn't tell us a whole lot. A large amount of our work comes in via email, phone calls, or people stopping by, and don't necessarily get captured as requests that we're working on. That's something that I'm actively trying to get the team to engage in, and have requested assistance from the senior staff in the city to get our staff to do a better job of, if they cannot create the ticket themselves, at least requesting that a ticket number be sent to them so that we have good tracking and good metrics for how we are meeting the needs of the city when an issue arises. Some of the future statistics I'd like to put up are time to first response after an issue is raised, time to resolution, first touch resolution, and a couple total duration of a ticket, and total hours or total time spent resolving tickets for the city. I think those will be much more meaningful in measuring the work that we do on a daily basis and throughout the year. And we'll dive in more of those as to what they mean once I get some metrics and start providing to the council. Next slide, Robert. So our organization is fairly small. I have 5 staff that work directly for me. We have an IT systems engineer who is in charge of all of what would classically be called tier 3 support, more of the high level engineering and network maintenance. We have 2 IT system support engineers. They're the ones who do the brunt of the heavy lifting for server support and bigger issues that our customers or our users are experiencing in the city. We have an IT service desk technician. He's responsible primarily for answering the phone and making sure that tickets get responded to, and is our first line of defense when we start having an issue. All 4 of these folks do a great job of being very personable and open with our staff, and doing the best they can to make sure that everyone is working and able to work with the systems we have. We have an open position in the IT project manager that was hired specifically to help out with the upcoming ERP replacement project. She left our organization right before the new year, and we are currently using that funding to hopefully hire an outside consultant to help us with the ERP project. And that's an item that's coming up later in tonight's meeting. And then we have a geographic information system analyst who does some amazing work with not just our city and our staff, but also the region as well. One of the current deliverables he brought up and worked with was the open restaurants and the restaurants that are doing delivery and takeout. That was a multi-city effort that produced some great results for our community to be able to know where they can get a meal for the evening. Next slide, Robert. Is that it? All right. Questions? I was trying to be very brief. Does anyone have any questions for me?
Kevin, of the FTEs, what number would you give of FTEs to that's paid by other contracts or other services delivered to other organizations?
So the ILAs we have currently pay almost the entire headcount cost for 1 FTE, and then utilize about 3/5 of that head. The current ILA that we have with Duval has expired, and I'm currently working on updates in conjunction with the mayor and city administrators for that for Duval. I'm advising them to add an additional half a head that will be dedicated directly to Duval and help with the transition plan for the point at which they want to start taking on their own IT support again. We're going to transition knowledge to that person and move our current support to more of a strategic planning role instead of the hands-on desktop support person that they currently do.
I suspect you know why I asked the question. I mean, in other words, let's say we said, hey, we want to cut one FTE from your department. That may leave you in a predicament where then you'd be recommending to pull back from those service contracts in order to get that internal work done, but then you'd lose the revenue that came with those contracts and we'd barely make it ahead financially at all. So I guess I was trying to get to that issue.
Yes, sir. Those contracts do fund bandwidth or capacity for the city of Snoqualmie above and beyond what they receive, what they contract for. And yes, if we were to cut those contracts or cut headcount, more than likely those ILAs would have to be reevaluated and pulled back from in order to maintain service levels within the city of Snoqualmie.
Yeah, so if I heard you correctly, you said 3/5 of a FTE is paid for by those service contracts. So we essentially get 2/5 of a IT person at no cost to the city of Snoqualmie.
Yes, sir, that is correct.
Thank you. Any other questions, council?
Councilmember Holloway?
Councilmember Holloway?
There it is, found it. That mute button moves around on me. So if I've got 2 WAN connections at 99.8 or 9%, could I do with one?
That is always a possibility. It depends on, right now, those are pretty heavily utilized. I think we're currently running them around 60% utilization on both. So if we removed one, we'd have to increase capacity on the other. And then that leaves us with a single point of failure for the city's egress. Should that go down where the city is down and off the map. So the redundancy allows us the ability to shape traffic. Yes, if we fail one, we're a little bit oversubscribed on the other, but majority, we can still do quality of service manipulation and make sure that the core business continues to stay up and running. So it's a trade-off. And yes, I think
agreed.
we
It's
still do
just
require both.
IT costs are not only just the personnel, but also the services, infrastructure, laptops, desktops, whatever. And we ought to look at that too. So I just wanted to
Yes,
get a
sir.
head scratch in there of.
And we are evaluating some of those other services that IT provides to the city. One of the ideas that came up was we're currently subscribed to about $84,000 in cell phone contracts per year to provide cell phones for city staff. That may be able to be reduced with reducing the number of cell phones that are out there where possible, while still maintaining the ability to do public records requests against text and email and everything else that happens on personal devices. So we are looking at all the areas where we're spending money on not just on capital expenditures as well as service contracts, and trying to make some recommendations so that if we do need to cut back, we have smart cuts that don't impact the city's ability to
Right.
complete our business.
For phones, you may actually look the other way. It says cell phone gives more availability, but your desk phone is redundant. And
Those
maybe
are
that should go away.
trade-offs, yes.
Okay.
Councilmember Ross?
So I know one of the projects planned for maybe this year or next year was fiber optics. So we have access. I guess we were negotiating with the quadrant for use of the fiber optics there in the Snoqualmie Ridge. Will that impact what we do with the King County INET or Comcast?
The way I understood that project was it wasn't necessarily providing bandwidth to the city or egress to the city. It was providing access for carriers to utilize that conduit and that dark fiber for their uses, or for they contract with the city for right of way. I do not believe that that would reduce our cost on egress on those two circuits.
Ask one more question.
Go ahead.
This is kind of overall, not necessary for IT, but I keep hearing about different open positions. So are we making the decision not to fill open positions right now in the city?
That's correct. Yeah, there's been several positions that have been open and unfilled, such as the, TS position and the ones IT and finance. Yeah, until we get a better handle on the current crisis we're in and on the some of the budget challenges. All right, council, right now it's at 6:57, so let's we'll take a 5-minute break, come back at about 7:02 to start the regular city council meeting. So if everybody could just stay logged on, we're just going to continue with this format. I'll leave it up to IT as to whether they want to suspend or pause the live stream or not. Well, so the roundtable is adjourned. Well, it appears we have a quorum back. Should we start the meeting, folks?
Do it.
Okay. All right. I now call the Snoqualmie City Council meeting to order. Ask the city clerk to please take the roll call.
Councilmember James,
Here.
Councilmember Ross, Councilmember Ross,
Continue, Jody.
Councilmember Holloway,
Here.
Councilmember Mayhew,
Here.
Councilmember Lassay,
Here.
Councilmember Sundwall,
Here.
Councilmember Shepherd,
Here.
Mayor Larson.
I am here. Councilmember Ross, are you back yet? All right. I suspect she'll be back in a moment, but may I have a motion to excuse Councilmember Ross?
Excuse Councilmember Ross.
Second.
All right, it's been moved and seconded to excuse Councilmember Ross from the meeting. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, motion is carried. With that, may I have a motion to approve the agenda as stated tonight?
So moved.
Second.
Motion and second to approve the agenda as presented. Is there any discussion, any questions? Bob Sturbank, I think there was an item you wanted to, you sent a resolution, if you could speak to that.
Yes, Mayor, thank you. I emailed about an hour ago a proposed additional item for the agenda. It is a resolution that would establish a small business and community organization rapid relief program, authorize the mayor to finalize eligibility criteria for that and to make initial funding pursuant to the emergency authority the mayor already has granted by council a few weeks ago, and then seek reimbursement from the Federal CARES Act funding. And so we're just looking, we do know that there is a special meeting availability for this Thursday if council wanted to discuss this and get a presentation, ask questions this evening and come back for a special meeting, or if council is comfortable, proceed with it this evening and authorize it. But at present, we just ask that it be added for council consideration tonight.
I have something that I would like to change.
Well, before moving on, if we could have a motion a second to add the item, the resolution that Bob Sturbank just spoke to, that would be.
I move as proposed.
Second.
Okay, a motion a second as stated. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
All right, motion is carried. Councilmember Shepherd.
I would like to remove the warrants from the consent agenda and also AB 20-051.
Hang on a sec.
Fireworks.
Okay, all right. All right, anything else, Councilmember Shepherd?
No.
All right, any other discussion or questions, council?
The piece that we've just approved to get onto the agenda, where will that be placed within the agenda?
The warrants will go down under F&A, and the fireworks permit, is that usually under community development?
No,
Or
I'm
does it-
talking about the COVID matter.
I'm sorry, excuse me,
I'm
Bob?
talking about the
Talking
COVID.
about the small business, I propose, but Mayor,
New-
suggest maybe.
The new resolution.
Or resolutions.
I'm sorry, what, I would assume that go under F&A? We go under F&A under resolutions, under F&A, correct? Yeah. Yeah. All right, anything else, council? All right.
Larson, I'm here now. This is Captain Ross.
All right, for the record, Councilor Ross has arrived. Thank you. All right, if there's no other questions or comments with the changes as noted, all those in favor of approving the agenda for tonight, say aye.
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 Those opposed? All right, motion is carried. With that, we'll move on to citizens' comments and give you a moment. I know the nice thing about Zoom is we do have, you click on participants, we have three. Well, I don't know how Nick Almquist ended up under attendees or public, but I have a Steve S. and a Richard Scheel. Richard's hand is up. Richard, you know the protocol on public comment. If I could ask the organizer to please unmute Mr. Scheel. Jody, do you have a timer? Just pull your phone out and get the timer on. Open your clock. Let me know when you're ready.
Are you asking if Jody's ready or if you're asking if I'm ready?
I'm asking if Jody's ready, Richard. Hang on. Thanks for your patience. It's
Mayor, I have it if you want.
Thank you, Rick. If you could just, yeah, are you ready? So Richard, you have 3 minutes, Richard, if you could just state your name and address for the record.
Okay, it's Richard Scheel, 6701 West Crestview Loop Southeast. My comment would be, I know the council has ahead of it over coming weeks and months, a number of budgetary things, both the main biennial budget. I know there's some things like the non-utility CIP. There's the water rate study and the decisions that will come out of that. I'd like to encourage the council to, as we have the current financial crisis due to the COVID medical crisis, that we keep in mind that even though a lot of the city's revenues do come from property taxes, which in a sense shouldn't be affected that much, but those property taxes are being paid by people who often will be significantly impacted. And there may be people who wind up defaulting on their property taxes, or maybe in the decisions that come in, the next time we set the rates for property taxes, that perhaps we may have quite a few citizens who are in significant difficulties financially. And I'd like to encourage the council to really tighten the belt, set the bar for what's approved for spending to a much, be much more cautious with spending, even though it may seem like property taxes will keep coming in. Things like the water rates can be very hard on people who have lost jobs or whose retirement savings have significantly gone down. So I would just like to encourage caution and keeping in mind the number of citizens who are in financial difficulty. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Mr. Scheel. I notice there's a Steve S. on there too. I don't know if it's a member of the public. There's a participant button down at the bottom, and if you pick on that and then look for a button down in the lower right corner, it gives you a little symbol to raise your hand, so at least I know you'd like to speak. I don't see anyone else at this time that would like to speak from the public, so with that, we'll move on. Rick, thank you. So moving on to the consent agenda. All items listed below be acted by one motion. Action items include minutes for the April 27th, 2020 roundtable and regular city council meeting. Other approvals include Agenda Bill 20049, approval of contract with File Local for business license payment and business and occupation tax filing information. And Agenda Bill 20052, Fourth Amendment to the agreement between the City of Snoqualmie and the Snoqualmie Tribe for the provision of sewer utility service, the tribe's initial reservation. Do I have a motion, council?
So moved.
Second.
I have a motion, a second, to approve the consent agenda as stated. Is there any discussion, any questions, council? Or I'm sorry, I should first ask, is there any member of the public that would like to comment on any of these items prior to action? Seeing no one move forward, council, is any questions or comments on the consent agenda at this point?
I have a question.
Councilmember Shepherd, go ahead.
On the agreement with the tribe.
Point of order. I thought the consent agenda was no discussion. I thought that was the point of consent.
No, we've always had opportunities to just discuss minor questions or for clarifications on the consent agenda.
Oh, okay. Carry on.
Go ahead, Councilmember Shepherd.
So I noticed that there was just a couple of tweaks between the previous agreement with the tribe and this agreement with the tribe. And I don't think that there's anything of substance, but I was just want to be sure they don't list separately like the gas station. They did before, and this time they didn't. Is there any, there's no real significance to that, is there?
I'll turn that over to Bob Sturbank to respond to.
Thank you, Mayor. The gas station was only recently built. It wasn't mentioned in previous agreements. What you're looking at in the way of strikeouts or minor changes suggested to fix a typographical error and to fix the chronology and the recitals, minor changes to the draft sent to me by the tribe's attorney. It's not any change to the existing agreement. And that one change just does reflect that the gas station was not developed as part of the casino or the initial reservation development. That's all. But the substance of the agreement is merely amends the term to add an additional 6 years, makes no other changes to the substance of the agreement between the city and the tribe.
Okay.
From the Third Amendment to the Fourth Amendment.
Well, I think the underlying question, Bob, is are the costs of an increased flows due to a gas station captured? And I think the answer is yes. The agreement essentially says they pay for the ERUs that are measured or that we receive and treat. And they were accepting of the knowing that the council might adjust or increase those rate increases and that they would be subject to those as our other ratepayers.
That's correct. And they do currently pay a rate based on flow. And based on their classification as a high-strength commercial discharger, then they pay that rate applicable to that category based on the flow, which is measured on a flow meter at the casino, or shortly downstream of this casino, I should say.
And a slightly higher rate that they're outside of city limits as any residents or any business that we.
No, the commercial users are pay on the same basis inside or outside of the city.
Oh, okay. We just do that for residential. Okay.
Correct.
Thank you, Bob. Any other questions on the consent agenda? All right. Oh, I'm sorry, Councilmember Sunwell.
Yeah, I mean, not to be I think Councilmember Shepherd is a fantastic question. I just don't understand the difference between comments on a consent agenda and how that would have been different than pulling us off the consent agenda and having the same conversation. So.
Yeah, it's a pretty gray area, but as a practice, and in my mayor's notes for years, I've always had, is there any discussion, questions or discussion on just the consent agenda as a whole? It's still a time saver if it doesn't mean reading in every single agenda bill. So even if there's a few clarifying questions and comments on a particular agenda bill, it's still much more efficient to have them bundled into one motion than several separate ones. That's been standard practice. Any other questions? All right, seeing none, we will move on. to,
Don't we need to vote on the consent agenda, Mayor?
I'm sorry, okay, thank you. Councilman Lissay. I thought I did, I got a little distracted. So all those in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed? All right. Motion is carried. With that, we will move on to mayor's report. I just want to turn it over to a few staff, or Mark Carrera, are you there? Or Rick, if you guys could give some of the updates on where we're at. I think the most topical change since you last had an update is around the,
Mayor,
yeah, Councilor Shepherd.
did we skip the agenda bill under finance and administration?
No. How's that?
AB 20-050?
I haven't come to that yet. I'm just
Oh, okay.
on the reports, yeah. I'm just doing my report before I start the reports of all the committees.
Oh, okay.
So I just want to, well, in fact, that's fine. Let's do this. I'm gonna keep all that till we come to the end of the meeting. Just ask for any staff reports, because I don't have a specific report per se. I think the staff could speak to some of the updates and details of anything that's transpired since the last council meeting to update you folks on. So let's just move on. Parks and Public Works Committee, is there any report?
Just that you saw the email earlier today, thanks to Brian Kraus. I mean, everything's kind of taken longer during COVID, but we have the bigger signs up now on the Hawk signal. So not being able to see them will no longer be an excuse. So hopefully it'll be easier for people to understand that. So thanks to Brian for getting that done.
All right, thank you. Community Development Committee report.
I don't have any report.
All right, Finance Administration Committee. Before I forget, let's pick up the, well, let's do the resolution. I don't know if any one of you could pull up the one that Bob sent out sort of about a half an hour before the roundtable meeting on the COVID issue for the, how we would spend the CARES Act for the COVID relief funds without getting tripped up with a gift of public funds. Does any council member have that in front of them where they could just make a quick motion? Or in lieu of that, I'll ask Bob Sturbank to read the summary and the motion, and then the council can say so moved as stated by the city attorney, if that works.
All right, just a moment. Mayor. Well, let's say in front of me. On March 9th, 2020, the city of Snoqualmie City Council approved.
Mom, now that it's up there, let's go ahead and let the chair of the F&A committee just read that. If you could make the type a little smaller for Councilor Mayhew, that'd be great.
Mayor, I wonder if this should go, I mean, this didn't come through F&A committee. I wonder if this should go under committee of the whole.
It's a finance related one, so I'm thinking fine here. I mean, unless the chair objects.
Well, it's just, I see at the top of the screen there, it says committee of the whole.
Oh, I got you.
And
Yeah,
I prepared this short agenda bill and I wasn't sure, so that's what I selected, but it's mayor council prerogative, however you want to proceed on the agenda.
If there's no objection, let's just throw it in F&A here, unless the chair, I'll respect your wishes if you want to throw it under committee of the whole.
Yeah, let's just switch it over there if you don't mind, Mayor.
Okay. All right, with that, there was another item under, okay, nothing else. Oh, okay, warrants. If you, chair, if you could read the approval.
Yeah, move to approve warrants. Move to approve claims in the finance director's claims report as presented. May I have a second?
Second.
All right, I have a motion, a second, to approve warrants and claims as stated by the Councilor Mayhew. Is there any member of the public that would like to comment on this item prior to action? And again, I see one member of the public, Steve S. And under participants, there's a button in the lower right corner. If you click on participants, there's a button in the lower right hand corner to raise your hand if you have a question. All right, seeing no questions being asked. Council, any questions or comments on the warrants? Councilmember Shepherd, or I'm sorry, Chair, if you want to speak to that first.
Just confirm to the council that the F&A committee did go through these warrants as called for in our revised procedures during the emergency, and the F&A committee did recommend unanimously that these be approved.
All right, thank you. Councilmember Shepherd.
Okay, so I'm still not voting to approve warrants until I get answers to questions.
All right, hearing no further discussion, all those in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed? Okay. As far as I heard, the motion passes 6-1. All right, moving back down under F&A, Agenda Bill 20050, Professional Services Agreement with Berry, Dunn, McNeil, and Parker and Limited Liability Corporation for Enterprise Resource Program, or ERP, Project Management and Oversight.
Move to approve a professional services agreement with Berry, Dunn, McNeil, and Parker, a limited liability corporation, for Enterprise Resource Program, ERP, Project Management and Oversight. May I have a second?
Second.
All right, motion and a second to approve the Agenda Bill 20050 as stated by Councilmember Mayhew. I don't see any members of the public with their hand up, so councilors, any discussion about this? Yeah, go ahead, Councilmember Mayhew.
So council, this is something we've been discussing for quite some time, the need for a new ERP system. Our system is quite old, and in fact, we are having difficulty getting support for it. And so there's a very real concern that if it were to break, that we might have difficulty unbreaking it, if you will. So we all in our biennial budget did budget capital funds for replacement, and we did budget for the services called for in this professional services agreement. This is the administration now moving forward on that. This particular bill provides for outside consultants to assist us in the process of selecting and then implementing the ERP system. As I said, this is something that was within our expectation when we passed the biennial budget. I will share with the council that at F&A committee there was some discussion, some concern raised that that these are quite complex systems, and some discussion about the bandwidth of our staff, especially in emergency, to handle this. The IT department director and our finance director talked a bit about how they plan to handle that, the fact that they felt that they did have the resources in place to do this. It would be a strain, but they felt they had a good plan, and they thought that it was time to move forward. I did share with the F&A committee, and will share with the full council, my concern that in any ERP system implementation, even the best plans implementations often hit roadblocks. Not always, but not infrequently either. And I would just encourage us, and I have encouraged the administration as well, to be aware that that could happen, and that we may need to help staff through this if they hit some bumps, even if they've done everything very, very well, which they certainly appear to at this point. In any event, this agreement will cover the whole period of selection and then implementation. So all of this money isn't about to start to be spent tomorrow, but they will start the process of engaging the service providers. That's all, Mayor.
Okay, thank you, Councilor Mayhew. Councilor, any other questions or discussions?
I have my hand raised.
Okay, go ahead, Councilor Shepherd.
Okay.
I'm having a toggle between two sets of screens.
Okay. So this is only for project management, correct? This agenda bill, the 260,000. I was looking at the all of the companies that they have done work for in the past, and we are significantly smaller than any that was listed on their website. We are about 1/4 the size of their smaller jobs. Normally they do 4 times our size or, statewide. So I'm a little concerned about, are we too small a fish for them to handle? And a couple of other thoughts I had as far as performance bonds and, what are we going to have a master project plan and schedule that we'll be able to see so that we can get some sort of benchmarks of where we're going to be when, so that we can follow along as a council. Because to date, I have felt like we've been kind of left out of the process, and it's a lot of money for us not to hear, what those milestones are. So, and then I'm not sure if we have the terms for termination built into this contract, but I also noticed that we don't have any competitive bids.
So I guess point of question, is it the council members' contention that due to the fact that this supplier normally works larger companies, that diminishes their qualifications?
I think I
think it's immaterial.
Councilors, I want to kind of restrain from having a debate between each other. Let me throw that out to Kevin and Robert to respond to, and then we can take it from there.
Okay, so let me respond just the evolution of this. And first of all, for Councilmember Shepherd's benefit, we put this out and we received the 1 bid back. So we did put this out. We did go to FNA with the RFP and actually did get it cleared through council. So this was put out. This bid did satisfy our requirements. And one thing I can say to that is, again, looking at the budgets of the city, it's not a good comparison. What we have to look at is the size of, or the type of system that we need. And again, we're full service. And if you recall, and I think it's still on our website, our ERP that we put out for the main RFP services, we have a lot of requirements that we need to make sure that that the incumbent or the winning bid for the main RFP is able to implement. But at the same time, we need a project manager that's experienced enough to do it. We had a project manager again in-house, that was Marilyn Gomez. She did leave employment in December of 2019. She was very experienced putting together ERPs and proposals, did a very good needs assessment, but the risk of hiring somebody else that might not have the experience to implement this project and hiring somebody else as a staff member that could leave in-house, that kind of goes to Councilmember Mayhew's or Mayor Pro Tem Mayhew's point of, having problems in the middle of a large undertaking like this. This company has a proven track record to implement. They are doing the implementation for Richland, Washington, which is on one of the systems that had bid for our vendors. So it's a very comparable system. Again, looking at the system and the requirements that we're implementing rather than the size of the city. And so looking at that and looking at the modules that we requested through our ERP, we were satisfied that they can handle us. And also this company's handled large and small. They've handled anything from state governments to small towns. They mentioned a few 10,000 and under. I mean, I know one of the principals that was part of the response, he was the former finance director of Whitman County. And I know they've had some clients in Eastern Washington. So they've had clients of all sizes to do this implementation. And as far as the project scope, absolutely. The answer is absolutely. We're going to have, and it's going to take a, we're at the point where internally we're at our scoring process. We're about to select, hopefully this week or next week, the winning vendor for the main ERP system. Then we're going to have to talk about a contract, terms, and a scope of work, deliverables, and projects. So we're going to be looking for a timeline. It's going to be put inside the contract and inside the scope of work. All council will be able to review it, so we're going to be completely transparent. We believe we've been completely transparent with the process thus far. We sought approval from the full council for both the ERP RFP and for this RFP as well for the project management. So we're trying to keep council in the loop. We actually, when this project is going to be undertaken, we will have offered to provide regular updates to the F&A committee as we go through this process, probably monthly, to get this work done. And again, it's going to take probably a month or two just to iron out the contract between the lending vendor and us. And then we, of course, we bring it to council as soon as we can, but we want to make sure that we have a firm contract in place that we're comfortable with. We'll go to council. Council have ample opportunity to review the contract as well. And then we're hoping to start work. I mean, one of the concerns, again, we have right now with our current ERP, Springbrook, is I'm just going to run a list of a couple things, 4 different things that we've had problems with in the past year with them. We've had problems with customer service, problems with responsiveness. We asked them at one point to implement the purchase order system. They couldn't even do that. And that's something we paid for, and they couldn't even implement that module. We have the requirement that council, and I appreciate it, passed tonight.
Mayor, point of order. We're not debating bringing Springbrook back.
Okay. Robert, if you could, I think the last item that was brought up was the issue of a termination clause. If you, Kevin, or you could speak to that.
Mr. Mayor, I can. There is a termination clause in this contract. It's can be found in paragraph, I believe it is 5 on page 2. 14 days notice unless there's a material breach, which is defined in the contract, in which case we can terminate immediately. So it's the standard termination provision from all of our professional services agreements that council sees. And then just circling back to the bid question, because this is professional services, it's not required to be bid or put out. Robert did in an effort to see if there were other interested contractors, but as mentioned, received only the one proposal.
All right, thank you, Bob. All right, council, any other questions or comments, concerns? All right, with that, all those in favor?
Oh, wait a minute, Mayor.
Yeah, go ahead.
Chair had his hand up.
Oh, sorry. No,
I may not be doing, I just put my hand up. If I'm supposed to be pushing a button, I guess I didn't know that, sorry.
You're supposed to dance.
No,
No, he's not. No, he's not.
I've got a toggle between 2 screens, so I'm sorry I didn't toggle back to you when I didn't notice you. The alternative, as I stated, is you can click on participants, and then down in the lower right-hand corner is a raise your hand button. And if you did that, then I should be able to see you.
Don't forget when you're done with your question, Mayor and Council, to unclick your raise the hand button. Once you raise it, then it says lower, it says not raised. So once you raise it, the question is answered, then go ahead and click it so it takes your hand off.
I see that Councilor Mayhew has his hand raised.
Yeah.
I just wanted to share with the council, Mr. Hammoud, I just want to highlight, Mr. Hammoud mentioned something a moment ago, and it was in one of the other council members' questions, but that was on this topic of this is a big project and kind of what's the project timeline, or sort of my paraphrase of that is, you know, what's the ability of the council to sort of have some oversight on such a big complex project. And what I'll share with you is I did speak briefly with Mr. Smith and Mr. Hammoud about that very notion. And I suggested to them that, you know, the council is not management. We should not, at least in my view, be looking at detailed project plans and then detailed project monitoring, but that perhaps just letting us know on such a big project, just letting us know periodically kind of how it's going at a very high level, just an oversight level. Are you on schedule? Are you on budget? Have you hit any bumps? You think you're going to be okay with the bumps, or you don't? Just so that if they do hit any bumps, it's not a surprise to us kind of towards the end. Sort of let us be sort of part of the project in a sense at a very high level, because we're just at an oversight, you know, budget level really. And they seem to be receptive to that. And I think I heard Mr. Hammoud say something like monthly. Maybe it doesn't need to be that frequently, but I was really encouraged that they seem to understand you know, the idea of giving us some visibility on that as it's going along. so I think they're committed to that, and I think we just heard Mr. Hamoud say that. So I thought that was great.
Thank you. Councilmember Shepherd.
So I feel that this council's job is to basically be over being a second set of eyes of what's going on at the city. And I don't agree with Councilmember Mayhew as far as just occasionally when the
Point of order, Mayor. I don't think individual council members are meant to be speaking to other individual council members. I think comments are to be directed to the chair.
Well, I think she actually was directing the comments to the chair. She was commenting about.
Well, I don't appreciate my name being invoked in that way.
I understand.
I didn't do that to the council member.
I'm going to allow it only because I think it raises an interesting question that I would frankly like to clarify, or even, well, maybe me more than the city attorney, in terms of it's a good brief conversation to have, a little off course, but to clarify what's the appropriate lane or role for a city council versus what's the lane that the administration is in. So Councilmember Shepherd, for that reason, I'll allow you to finish your points if you could.
I want to be kept in the loop on a regular basis with benchmarks. And I do not agree that council should not be made informed about what the progress of this is. This has been approved for implementing for over 2 years now. And I have not seen a whole lot of progress. And I'm really concerned about, the cost is going to be significantly more than $260,000. It's going to be well over $1 million. And I would like to see progress made. And I've heard the comments about how it is challenging to implement an ERP system. And I've seen that myself. But I think it's really critical for us to keep a close eye on it. And I would really like to not be cut out of that, being kept abreast of what's going on. I think you need to do these things, but I've also been through a process where it has been just a big mess if it's not followed carefully. And sometimes I feel that this has just not been made a priority.
Okay, I guess in very general terms, I think of a saying that our former city attorney was often fond of quoting, and that was that a council should never do indirectly what it's not legislated directly to it to do in terms of its powers. And what I mean by that is, and as Councilmember Holloway and Jeans often know, there was a case before when we were doing the wayfinding signs, and there were some council members that wanted to involve themselves into the selection of the fonts and the colors of the sign. And that was involving themselves way too much in the detail, the management details or execution of projects. Council does the high level, what they want to see done. Administration or the executive branch of government does the how and executes that. And it gets really muddled when you suddenly have 7 more cooks in the kitchen, and it can create the very chaos and confusion that you're speaking to, Councilmember Shepherd. So it's just a word of caution. We're always trying to struggle to find that appropriate balance. We certainly want to keep those that control the purse strings and do the oversight abreast of projects enough to at least be aware of what the generalities are. But there can be a risk of having council members deeply involving themselves in detailed management decisions of a project that simply is not helpful for the council nor the administration. And so we hear your points, and those concerns are well made. At the same time, I would ask the Councilmember Sunwell.
Yeah, if this discussion sounds familiar, it's one we've been having for 2.5 years. And it's just it's not a right or wrong, it's a fundamental difference of opinion on how things should be handled and how weedy we should get. And I guess without calling the question, I'm just going to invite us to move on. This has nothing to do with whether we approve this project or not.
Yeah. Point well made, Councilmember Sunwell. I only thought it was worth noting because the council does have the power. They can say, well, if you're not going to let us pick the fonts and the colors, then we won't approve it. And that's what I meant by referring back to comments of our former city attorney is that this relationship between a council and executive branch, or the legislative branch, and executive branch runs more smoothly, I guess, when each kind of respects those roles. And
my point is there aren't 4 people who think that.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
let's move on.
Point well made. Okay. Bob Sturbank, did you want to make a quick point or?
Well, I don't want to get in the way of council moving on, other than to note that the statute clearly assigns to the mayor and not to the council the power to see that contracts are faithfully kept and performed. So in this case, approval of the contract is in the council's bailiwick. Implementation oversight of the contract belongs to the mayor. That's what the statute says.
Right. I think that point was well made by the last sentence or comment by Councilmember Sunwell. So with that, I'm happy to move on. Any other comments or questions, council?
Yeah.
Councilmember Holloway.
So if you read the material, you'll actually further separation of responsibilities. This contractor is not responsible for the overall project schedule. They are responsible for the interaction with the vendor. The overall project schedule will be the responsibility of the city. This contractor will consult on that. So that whole discussion is immaterial to the contract you have, except tangentially tonight. So I agree. Let's move on.
All right. Anything else, council? All right. Sorry, trying to toggle. All right. Hearing none. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
No.
All right. Sounds like it passes 6-1. So thank you, council. Before I ever lose track of it, can someone tell me where the fireworks agenda bill belonged? Which committee was that in? Is that
It's in public safety and you can get to it anytime you want.
okay? Perfect. So I'm just about coming up on that. Then I didn't know if I needed to back up or not. Any other items for Finance Administration Committee?
No further items.
All right. Public Safety Committee. Bob, if you,
Other than this item, no report. So let me.
yeah, if you could go back and pick up Agenda Bill 21051 from the consent agenda, and please read that in and make a motion.
Per SMC 8-30.030C, the fire chief shall submit application to the council for approval to allow retail sales of fireworks to be sold in the city limits. J&M LLC has applied for a fireworks stand permit to sell fireworks from June 28th until July 4th in the old IGA parking lot at 7730 Center Boulevard Southeast. The fire chief has reviewed the application and has found that the complete in compliance with the requirements of the state statute and regulations of SMC 8-0.30. Recommend move to approve the fireworks stand permit of J&M. Need a second.
Second.
All right. I have a motion, a second, to approve Agenda Bill 20051 as stated by Councilmember Jeans. Councilmember Jeans, go ahead.
So this is the renewal of a contract that we've had for years that they've sold at that same location under the same circumstances. And in the event that we don't have a public fireworks kind of a thing that we're still working on, that would lend itself to the public buying fireworks. And it would seem to make sense to have a fireworks stand in the city limits selling only approved fireworks, which means no rocket type fireworks. It would be best that that be in the city rather than forcing citizens who want fireworks to go outside of the city and be subject to purchasing non-approved fireworks and then executing them in the city. That's all.
Well, thank you, Councilmember Jeans. Any other, well, hang on one sec. We have two public people there. One is dialed in by phone. It's not clear to me that they have any means to speak. Kevin, can I ask you if there's a 425009 or a phone number that ends in 009 along with Steve S that's on as attendees or public? Are they both able to speak, or is the phone number able to speak somehow if you allowed it?
If the phone number would like to speak, they can press *6 or actually *9 on their phone, which will raise their hand. And that's the way they'll signify that they want to speak.
Okay. So at this time, I give an opportunity for, or Steve S., you can raise your hand. I can see that if you do that. Otherwise, whoever's on the phone number that ends in 009, if you want to do *9 and let us know if you'd like to make a comment at this time, you can have 2 minutes. I'm seeing no further movement. I'll see Peggy Shepherd, Councilmember Shepherd's hand is up. So Councilmember Shepherd, go ahead.
So I'm concerned about this being something that people are going to be out during the COVID-19 lockdown. That's the reason that I'm not for this.
All right, thank you. Any other comments or questions, Councilmember Ross? Councilmember Shepherd, if you could take your hand, thank you. Councilmember Ross?
Can't hear you.
Councilmember Ross, if you could unmute. There you go.
But we've had to stand, they've had to stand for over this numerous years. So I have a question for Chief Phipps and Chief Carrera. I know last year we didn't run into any issues. I mean, do they have any concerns regarding how the fireworks stand? Chief Carrera or Chief Phipps?
Sure, this is Mark Carrera. So we did have a little bit of an issue a couple of years ago, and we reached out to the provider of the agreement, A&M LLC, and talked with them about it. This was probably 4 years ago, and they immediately addressed it, and we have not had a problem since. And that includes periodic visits up to the stand to make sure that they're doing what they're supposed to be doing.
Councilmember Holloway.
So this is a permittable use within the city limits, has been for years. Giving them the permit does not relieve them of any obligations, nor the users of this material of any obligations in regards to the current COVID-19 situation. That is a separate matter that they will have to comply with. So immaterial to the permit question in front of you now.
I just want a quick note. Caller that ends in 009 has his hand up. When the council has concluded their conversation or debate, I will give them an opportunity prior to the vote, as is with former tradition, only because of the unusual circumstances. And I think it took them a little bit to figure out how to do the hand. So 009, I see you. I'll get to you in a moment once the council is discussing.
Reserve the option for rebuttal.
Okay. Any other? Okay. Councilor Mayhew.
Well, I guess I was just going to make the same point as Councilmember Holloway, is that members of the public are not part of this debate, but we ought to hear their concerns and be able to incorporate that in our discussion. So I'd rather interrupt us and hear, if we're going to take that comment, I'd rather take it now, so that then any further debate we have could incorporate any concerns we hear.
Okay. If there's no objection, council, I will go ahead and do that. Any objection? All right, let's do that. Kevin, we see that the phone number ending in 009 has their hand up. Can you unmute them and allow them to speak, please? And if you could state your name and address for the record, and you have 2 minutes. Rick, you got that clock ready?
They're unmuted.
All right, go ahead, 009, Agent 009.
Well, hello there. This is Perry Phipps.
Oh, there you go. A really sneaky character.
It was nice to hear that process go through, but unfortunately, I apologize for having you take the time to do that. I was trying to get through earlier and couldn't. I just wanted to say, sounded like Councilmember Ross wanted some input from the police department in regards to the fireworks being sold. And we have had no problems in the last 2 years. I think 3 years ago, we had a small issue that, like Chief Carrera commented on, that we took care of. And subsequently, we have had no issues the last 2 years.
All right. Thank you, Chief. Okay, council, back to you. I'll just throw it open for any other discussion or questions, comments. All right, hearing none. All those in favor?
Aye.
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 All right, those opposed?
Nope.
Motion passes 6-1. Thank you, council. With that, any other items to report under Public Safety Committee? Councilor Jean.
No report.
All right, with that, we'll move on to Committee of the Whole, and I'll ask anyone to take the initiative once they find it, or if we could pull that up on the presentation screen. I don't have the agenda bill number for that, but the resolution 1536 regarding the COVID-19 or the CARES funding. Get that in a second here. It was the.
I have it if you want me to read the summary statement.
Go ahead, Councilman Ross.
On March 9th, 2020, City of Snoqualmie Council approved Resolution 1535 ratifying a proclamation of emergency regarding the COVID-19 situation. The intent of this resolution is to establish a small business and community organization rapid relief program in order to assist in maintaining the stability of the local economy and to support community organizations, including those that provide necessary human and social services, in order to protect the cities and the community organizations' ability to continue to provide essential services for the public welfare and benefit, and to allow citizens, employees, and business owners to continue social distancing and other practices necessary to maintaining public health. Move to approve resolution.
I believe it's 15, well, it says 1535 on the summary statement. Jody, can you verify if it's 1535? I have my notes 1536. Can you verify what number it is?
That would be 1536, sir.
Move to approve resolution 1536, establishing a small business and community organization rapid relief program in response to the novel coronavirus COVID-19. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, I have a motion and a second to approve resolution 1536 as stated by Councilmember Ross. Jody, please note to correct the number in the summary statement to 1536 to 1535.
Mayor, actually, the reference to 1535 is a reference to the resolution that ratified the emergency proclamation.
You're absolutely correct, Bob. There's nothing to correct, Jody, other than my misunderstanding. So, which has been done. So the box is checked. I don't see any members of the public raising their hand at this point. Now that one has been identified. And Councilmember Holloway.
So I kind of voted no on this because in general, I don't like agenda bills popping up 1 hour before the meeting. Does not give council time to review. Having done a quick review, in the final section of therefore hereby be it resolved, section 2B, the mayor may into an agreement with the city. There's there's a word missing.
Yeah, we caught that earlier. We were going to get that.
Yeah. I don't know what happened there.
But thank you.
I did make that change.
But tell you the truth, guys, in the time allowed, that's all the further I got. And I understand the urgency here, but this is insufficient time for council to do its due diligence.
So I'm left with two choices, and that is that I continue to act solely as the mayor on emergency proclamation, or I try to, take advantage of some time allowed to bring back to the council and keep them abreast of the resources that we would provide to the community. Some could be very significant, particularly the $410,000 coming from the COVID relief fund through the CARES Act. So, but it's a tension between trying to keep the council involved, but moving very quickly, and waiting 2 more weeks to bring this back to committee and council is precious time that I can't afford. So either the council has to just give me directive to say, look, don't bring anything back to us, don't involve us, just keep moving forward on this. We would have to do these procedures anyway. The only purpose of this resolution is to strictly protect the city using whatever protocols we could find out there that's already been done by other communities and cities, and directions we're getting from the state or otherwise, to avoid any gift of public funds or being auditor, and yet moving very quickly to get the funds out where it's desperately needed right now. Bob Sturbank, did you want to add to that? Or
I was just going to suggest, Mayor, if council were amenable, I could make a brief presentation about the substance of the resolution, take any questions. At that point, council could decide whether they're comfortable moving this forward tonight, or in lieu of that, we could certainly add it to the agenda after the roundtable this Thursday. And that would give council members some more time to consider and reflect on, read the resolution, and come back rather than waiting another 2 weeks.
So might I suggest this, council? We're doing quite well on time tonight. We're coming up on 8 o'clock, and this is the only remaining substantial topic on the agenda. In fact, if I'm not incorrect, that's about the only one other than a couple of reports. So because of the importance and urgency of this, perhaps we could let Bob kind of go through it quickly, point by point, and then address any questions and get a comfort level with the council to try and find that balance between the council being feeling that they've been respectful and able to do their due diligence. I'd love to have the council involved in these processes as much as we can as we move forward very quickly. So if there's no objection, then Councilor Mayhew.
Order, Mayor?
Yeah, go ahead.
Point of order, just regarding when in the sequence we would take public comment. I just want to get that out of the way up front before we all get into our conversation, but maybe that should be after Mr. Sturbank's presentation. I don't know.
Well, I think when it was first queued up, I noted that there was I didn't see any hands up of public. There's technically only one person with the plug, Steve S. Steve has not had his hand up. Well, now Steve just disappeared. So we have no members of the public any longer in the meeting. We have one sneaky member posing as Perry Phipps.
Okay, thank you. Withdrawn.
All right, I got a few hands up. Councilman Lassay, Councilor Shepard, Councilor Jeans.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I too was of the same initial opinion of one of my fellow council members, but wanted to at least go through the process of hearing more about this, because I too did not have time to review the resolution and supporting data along with this. I would encourage council that we do it. If Mr. Sturbank could do a quick presentation, I would still like time to review the information before going to a vote, and would be in favor of even making a motion to moving to adding a discussion to our meeting on Thursday, so that the mayor can get a direction from the council on this.
All right, thank you, Councilor Shepard.
I would like to get some sort of reporting of what money is being given out under this, under the Emergency Act from the city of Snoqualmie.
You've received a full report to date. The only monies that were given was to the homeless shelter to the tune of $9,000.
Okay.
Since that time, I'm not aware of a single penny we've given out yet.
Okay.
I think we were prepared to do that. We've been we've gotten some requests from a few. We've been working on interior criteria and start moving things. It feels to me like we've already been dragging our feet for about 3 or 4 weeks now. We need to get moving on this. But now with that federal money coming, we really need to move. Councilor Mayhew. Councilor Mayhew, you need to unmute.
All these buttons to push. Okay. I just want to say I am very pleased that the city staff under the mayor's direction is moving forward rapidly. This is an emergency situation. People are suffering. The funds that are coming to us externally through the state from the federal government are meant to be spent quickly to make a difference now. And I think I think the administration is doing a fantastic job. I support that. And I don't want to do anything to indicate otherwise. However, I'm just not going to be able to get to a yes vote on this particular suggestion tonight, because I just haven't had time to read it, and I just believe there's a certain amount of due diligence I should do. I'm happy to hear the presentation. That's probably helpful, and I really like the other council members' suggestion that perhaps we could vote on this on Thursday, which just gives us the time. But I would say I don't want that to slow the mayor down or the administration down with what I think is fantastic, inclusive work with the community. They're moving quickly, but they're moving very deliberately, and so I won't be able to support voting on this tonight, but I absolutely support what's going on, and I want to make sure that's not misunderstood.
All right, thank you. Councilor Ross. You have to unmute.
Sorry. I would like to have our city attorney Sturbank kind of go through this, and then if we want to vote on Thursday, that's great. But at least we go away knowing what the recommendations or what our options are.
All right, with that, I don't see more hands up, so, and it seems to be mostly Councilmember Jeans.
Actually, it's hardly worth hearing from Councilmember Jeans because I just reiterating what other people have said. I'd like to hear Bob Sturbank, and I'm not ready to vote on it. I'd love to vote on it Thursday, and it sounds like I had that option, and we had that option, and certainly that would be consistent with the emergency nature of this. Taking a look at this between now and Thursday would be something I'll spend some time on. Thanks.
Thank you, Councilmember Jeans. I will say I think Thursday is quite workable. It's incredibly extremely doubtful that we would be spending money between now and Thursday. You know, we need the applications to come in or finish the criterion application that goes out. Those will come back, and then at that point, then we would award those monies to the various ones, assuming there isn't enough money to fund all the needs, and then that money would go out. It's at that time that this resolution would really very much be needed in order to protect ourselves. So let's have Bob do a presentation. If by some by his powers of persuasion, everybody goes, "Oh my God, that was so brilliant! Let's go ahead and do it tonight." We could do that. Otherwise, waiting until Thursday, I think, would be workable. So, Bob, go ahead.
All right. Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Council, for indulging the walk-on nature of this item. So since the onset of the pandemic and the declaration of emergency, I think there's been a focus and conversation at the staff level and the administration, and I know in the community and the council as well, about how to provide relief to affected folks, including folks in the business community. And as council probably is well aware, and one aspect of Washington law that is often a barrier to business relief programs is the state constitutional prohibition on gift of public funds. And there are very special limited exceptions to that for example, lodging tax money and so on, or if we're contracting with social service agencies to receive services. But otherwise, cities are not engaging in direct grant programs for businesses. Those are typically the province of foundations or other nonprofit or private fundraisers. So about a month ago, the Attorney General issued some new guidance that emphasized that where under the case law, where something is a fundamental purpose of government, that the court will not engage in a gift analysis, but say if it's a fundamental purpose of government, then it's permissible to make direct appropriations. And the Attorney General's guidance emphasized that protection of public health and welfare has always been a fundamental purpose of state and local government. And that in this particular pandemic, where so many people are affected and public health is the centerpiece of the concerns and the driving factor in the stay-at-home order and other governmental directives that are adversely affecting local government, that the Attorney General recognized that a properly crafted program could place protection of public health at the center and could be justifiable and not a gift to public funds. Right around the same time that guidance came out, the first CARES Act was passed, and I think it was March 27th. And the initial determination in that was that most local governments were not going to receive any money, that all of the money for government was going to go to state governments and city and counties with populations in excess of 500,000. A week or two went by, the Department of the Treasury, and that money was going to be limited to reimbursing for direct impacts incurred in responding to COVID-19. So additional PPE, overtime for police, fire, EMT, those kinds of direct expenditures. A couple of weeks passed, the Department of the Treasury issued guidelines that said, well, in addition to those direct purposes that are contemplated in the CARES Act statute, that it would also be allowable to reimburse state and the governments for populations in excess of 500,000 for indirect effects, including those suffered by local business communities for business interruption, improvements that might need to be made to comply with social distancing, plexiglass screens, reduced number of tables for restaurants, all of those kinds of things. They followed that up with some detailed FAQs that kind of further elaborated on what would be allowable qualifying expenditures for indirect expenses. And then the state of Washington announced that it was going to allocate its share of that first phase CARES Act funding to local governments on a per capita basis. And that we learned after a few more days that the city of Snoqualmie's share would be in the neighborhood of 410,000. We briefed the Parks and Public Works Committee and F&A committees just this past week, and there was an indication of interest on the part of council on hearing about details and a way that we might make funding available at this council meeting. And so that's what really got the wheels in motion to put a program together. We found a couple of other city examples where they had done something similar. And we learned that the State Department of Commerce is formulating more detailed guidelines about how the state will make the CARES Act funding available to local governments. There's going to be a template contract and guidelines about eligible, ineligible expenditures. So trying to roll all that together and not wait for the guidelines, we assembled this resolution by which the council would establish a program and around the basic goals of making funding available to affected local businesses and community organizations, including social and human services organizations, that the mayor would establish the more detailed eligibility criteria, particularly in compliance with the Department of Treasury guidelines and whatever other guidelines are forthcoming from the Commerce Department, that the expenditures would be made using the existing authority that the mayor has under his emergency powers, which would then trigger, as council will remember, a backfill from the contingency reserve fund, which would in this case then be followed by application to the state for reimbursement from the CARES Act funding. And so the resolution, if I'm going to try to get to my version so I can scroll through, but if the version on screen, I don't know if Kevin or the mayor is controlling it, if you could go to page 6, please, of the document, or bottom of page 5, going over to page 6, council will see that section 2 of the resolution contains the council's establishment of a small business and community organization rapid relief program, describes the focus and the purpose and the program goals, and then outlines a series of steps by which the program would be implemented, including the mayor's establishment of eligibility criteria, entry into an agreement with the Chamber of Commerce or other suitable contractor to assist in vetting the applications and administration of the program, solicitation of applications.
I can't read that fast.
I'm sorry, I was just trying to present the highlights.
Oh, sorry. Okay, I thought I was supposed to be reading along. Sorry.
And then ultimately recommendation to the city, and city would allocate the money to the individuals by contract, and that then the city would follow up and seek reimbursement from CARES Act funding. Subsequent sections in the resolution talk about funding, this funding mechanism that I just outlined, which is the city would spend from the general fund or other appropriate fund, backfill with the contingency reserve fund pursuant to the emergency management changes that the council authorized a few weeks ago, and that then the city would seek reimbursement through the CARES Act funding. And the reason for that multi-step process is our understanding, at least currently, and this may change when we see the Department of Commerce guidelines, is that the money will not be allocated to the city in a lump sum grant, but will be subject to our providing a detailed application for reimbursement, similar to the way we apply for FEMA funding after a flood or other emergency, where we have to document all of the costs that were incurred and justify them in accordance with the applicable eligibility criteria. So that means in order for the city to get the CARES Act funding, the city first has to spend city money and then turn around and ask the state for CARES Act share and demonstrate that we're entitled to it because they were proper expenditures. So that in a nutshell is what you see in this resolution. I'm happy to take any questions, or if council wants to take a few minutes to read this and then ask questions, or whatever the council's pleasure might be.
Councilmember Jeans has had his hand up the entire presentation from the attorney, but I suspect it's because he left it up. There we go. Councilmember Mayhew.
Okay, Mr. Sturbank, thank you. That was helpful. That all seems pretty straightforward to me. The only question that's jumping out at me at this point is I'm not, so a little bit above where we are on the page there, there's some reference to, I didn't read it closely. It's good. We're zeroing out Fund 002. I just don't know why we're doing anything with Fund 002. There's sufficient fund balance in Fund 1 to cover the mechanics that you just explained to us. So I'm wondering why we're needing to go and clean out Fund number 2 to do this.
Well, I wasn't suggesting we were going to clean out Fund 002, but only that the changes that the council previously authorized to the emergency management powers of the mayor indicate that when the mayor wants to make expenditures that are due to the emergency, the mayor would expend those from an appropriate general fund line item, and that those would then be backfilled by the contingency reserve fund, so that the general fund would be made whole and available for the purposes for which the council appropriated it prior to the emergency.
So if the amounts are just reimbursed, excuse me, from this CARES Act funding, then we wouldn't pull it out of Fund 002. Is that correct?
That would be an option, certainly. We just don't have any sense sitting here today how fast that's really going to happen. What the paperwork and review time is going to be. If it looks like we send something in and we get paid by the state, 2 weeks later, it probably doesn't make sense for us to spend from one place and then move it from 002 and then do that in reverse when we get money. But if it's longer than that, and the window on this is technically through the end of the year, although the state has said locals that want reimbursement better complete their request by November to give the state that last month of the federal eligibility period. So it's in the relative near term, but not necessarily tomorrow or next week.
All right, well, that was the only concern I had. Maybe that's something that could be, maybe I should follow up with someone, or that could be followed up on. Just, I'd hate to see us wiping out Fund 002 and then reimbursements, maybe somehow not, the mechanics there are concerning me, but other than that, the rest of it, I don't have any other questions on. Thank you.
Councilmember Shepherd. You have to unmute, Councilmember Shepherd.
Thank you. Okay, so the classification of small business. I know we have, for instance, we have 3 Starbucks. Would that be classified as small?
Those are the criteria that the staff with the liaisons to, like Councilmember Sunwell is the liaison to the Chamber of Commerce, and so he will be involved in those conversations trying to delineate some of the criteria by which we would award local businesses. So it's kind of defining what do we consider a small business. I don't believe that the federal or the state government is putting some restriction on what precisely that size is. You imagine companies in Kirkland or Renton might be quite different than, or small businesses in those cities versus small businesses in our city, or even Issaquah. Councilmember Jeans?
So when I review this for Thursday's vote, I'm thinking about, let's say there's a small business who fills out an application and we think it looks good and we fund it. And then we go for reimbursement. And then the federal government says, oh, I'm sorry, the catch-22 you didn't understand. We're not going to reimburse that. And I'm curious about one particular kind of a situation where the applicant has applied to us and the applicant has other possibilities of making the application. And if the applicant gets money from the government, and then gets money from us and we reimburse them, is that the kind of catch-22 that we're going to be in and up holding the bag for those kinds of things? So that's what I'm going to be looking at. And if anybody has any comment about that, that would be helpful.
Okay. I'll go to Bob Sherbick to respond, and then Councilmember Holloway, and then followed by Councilmember Sunwell.
Sure, and that's a good point and highlights the reason why we need to take some time to get the remaining guidance and craft the eligibility criteria to match them. So for example, among the things on the Treasury guidelines is a requirement that says it's ineligible to basically to double dip, to, you know, for a business to receive money for business interruption or payroll expenses for which they've also already been allocated share from the Payroll Protection Program, which is a separate federal COVID-19 relief act. So we're trying to build criteria like that into ours, and that's part of the reason we're going to need to have, I think, a contractual agreement with the recipients of the money so that they agree up front that they're not going to use our money for an expense that's separately reimbursed by some other federal or state source. And then we will have to probably account for it in our submittal to the state. But that is the risk with expend first, get reimbursed later, that not all, that for some reason there will be a finding that some of the expenditures turn out not to be eligible. And that's why I was suggesting this use of the reserve, because it would protect the general fund. But I guess it depends which fund you want to protect more from that risk. And I'm sure that Mr. Hammoud will want to weigh in on this, because there'll be accounting and his staff and resources affected by however we choose to do it.
Councilmember Holloway, then Councilmember Sunwell.
Okay, just next time when we do this, just plan like a minute per page recess and we can read and go through. Sorry I put you guys through this. My other comment though, up earlier in the document, you stress pretty strongly brick and mortar businesses as well as charities. We have a large number of home businesses, which may not qualify under brick and mortar. I'm wondering if we want to consider that of at least a business address within the city of Snoqualmie. Not necessarily brick and mortar implies storefront.
And I think at least as we envisioned it, that was intended to be the emphasis. 410,000 is a lot of money, but it's not going to go very far in terms of number of businesses. If you think about, for example, maybe 10,000 max per business, or if you thought about 15 as a max, that's part of what staff are discussing in terms of the criteria. So I don't know if there's enough to cover home-based businesses if what you want to protect is the brick and mortar folks who have invested in the community here by their locations. Mayor, I don't know if you want to chime in on that more.
We've already worked a little bit with the chamber on awarding some funds that came through the Seattle Metropolitan Chamber to about $9,000 to 9 different businesses. We had 29 applicants, did some quick criteria, vetted them through that. But you're all touching on the very sort of internal debates we had on size of business, type, is it this, that. Some more and more of those home type businesses and not a brick and mortar shop. And so it was certainly my intent to include or be open to those folks as well, as long as they're part of the Snoqualmie community.
Yeah, it ought to be needed impact. I agree.
Right. Yeah, especially if, just because they're an at-home business doesn't mean they might be employing 4 or 5 Snoqualmie residents or folks around the valley in whatever business they're doing.
Yeah. Okay.
Councilmember Stonewall, then Councilmember Shepherd.
Yeah, so, and this isn't a bad thing. We're getting into a criteria discussion, not a discussion so much of what's sitting before us. And I understand that, because I think it's something we all want to get to. But on that note, I think we need to decide what Thursday in the context of this looks like. Because if we're going to have a criteria conversation, that's different. And my proposal would be that we see what the city's initial kind of thought of that is. And I know that's going to be presented to a smaller subgroup of various liaisons. And I guess what I'm saying is if I think there's an opportunity for the administration, a smaller group, to sort of have a first whack at this, and then come to council with it, because we could easily spend all of Thursday and Saturday if we had a meeting, talking about everyone's sort of views on guidelines and criteria. So if we're going to do that on Thursday, I'd just like to know in advance.
Okay. We're not looking to reinvent the wheel here. There's a lot of other communities working these very same things, so we can reach out and kind of get the best of some of their work on the similar issues. But of course, we're different than most communities in terms of the size and scope and the type of complexion. So make those adjustments. Councilmember Sunwell will be involved in some of that initial brainstorming on those criteria, some of which we already worked on with that prior grant award from some Seattle monies that I talked about. Councilmember Shepherd and Councilmember Jeans.
So one of the things that we had talked about in public safety, there was something mentioned by Chief Carrera about this money possibly being used for firefighters. And I'm just wondering if there's any expenses that the city has incurred that this money could be used toward. And I don't know whether it would be like keeping the restrooms washed out in our parks and things like that.
Yes, it can be used in that matter. Anything that was necessary to respond to the COVID-19 crisis. Mark, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say what I was referring to was actually the FEMA reimbursement dollars that come in that can be used for protective measures and responding to the COVID disaster. So FEMA, we're like Bob Sturbank was talking about earlier, there are multiple pots of money available. The CARES Act is one specific to the businesses and health and human service needs or social service needs. FEMA is more towards the response side of it. So we're tracking those funds or those dollars internally. We'll present that to FEMA. We've already applied through the grant process, and we've received funding for things like cleaning the bathrooms or providing PPE for staff or overtime to respond to the event. Those dollars would come from the FEMA side.
Councilor Jeans.
I have nothing further.
All right. All right. I don't see any further hands up at this point. Councilor Mayhew.
Move to postpone consideration of this bill until our Thursday meeting.
Second.
All right, motion and a second to postpone until the Thursday. Excuse me. The May 15th meeting. Yeah.
Aye.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? All right, motion passes unanimously. So we'll take that up then again on Thursday. Thank you, Council. Well, again, I think Councilmember Shepherd or Sunwall made excellent points, which is we'll try to get to you the information that we're trying to involve even Councilmember Sunwall, Lassay, and Mayhew on some of that, again, a criteria development, whether it's the nonprofits like the Railway Museum, businesses, and human service agencies, to try and get them to you as soon as possible. But I think there's probably far more intense interest about that criteria by which some organizations will be scored than perhaps this resolution. This one's pretty straightforward. As Councilor Mayhew said, in terms of just making sure we don't get tripped up with gift of public funds trying to give some federal monies away. All right, with that, back to the main menu.
Can you tell me who seconded that, please?
Oh yeah, who seconded that motion?
That was me, Sean.
Okay.
Or
Thank you.
Councilmember Sundwell, as he's been referred to a couple of times today.
Yeah.
It's because they saw you after the 80 degree Sunday.
He was up on Mailbox Peak getting toasted by the sun. All right, I don't think there was any other items for committee of the whole. I could give a brief, well, I think some of what, a lot of what the debate that just happened with this resolution 1536 on the funding, I think got you up to speed on some of what we're wrestling with getting that $410,000 out. Mark Carrera or Rick, do you guys have any other items that perhaps we need to update the council on that we've been working on the last couple of weeks since they last had a detailed update? Yeah, go ahead, Mark.
Sure, I can give you a couple other highlights of what's been going on over the last week since the last time we talked. The Human Services branch continues to be active in the disaster response. We had our call this morning, and thank you, Councilmember or Mayor Pro Tem Mayhew, for attending that. It was good to see you on that call. And a couple of things that we've been doing with that group is one is we've established a bag drive so that the local food banks don't have to purchase bags. That's been very successful, and we continue to collect those locally. We'll keep that going for another couple weeks. We've also are working with the food bank along with North Bend. We've have a couple of our CERT volunteers that are going to start training over there tomorrow and then start staffing the food bank. So nice to see us getting to use our CERT volunteers in a productive way. You already talked about the CARES Act funding. That's been a pretty large topic of our time. Over the last few weeks, we've actually established a return to work group made up of different department members from each department within the city, and we're planning how we're going to restaff City Hall. So we have a document that's being produced, and we're going to talk about it at our staff meeting tomorrow. And then on a sign of hope, the parks actually opened the tennis courts last week. So that's good news, although the stuff I'm reading in the news is that our numbers in King County and the urban area are starting to uptick. But hopefully it'll stabilize and we'll continue to move through these phases quickly. That's all I have.
Thank you, Mark. Rick, did you have anything to add?
Thank you, Mayor, Council. No, I continue to have weekly meetings with all the city managers, city administrators in the region. There's only about 25 to 30 of us out of 250 that are regulars on this call. So we make sure that we're taking care of that and kind of listening to what other agencies are doing. And like you said earlier, not reinventing the wheel. We're trying to push this CARES Act funding out as soon as we can. It's obviously there's stumbling blocks to doing something like this. There's a paper trail that needs to be done. We have to make sure we're legal, following statute, get approval from electeds. So we're pushing that as hard as we can. That's why we brought it tonight, because we're kind of in a time crunch to get funding out. And then looking for secondary and third rounds of funding. Hopefully that'll come down. So we're looking into that as well. We're also looking at events, and when people want to do events, what's the criteria for that, and what's the city willing to allow based on the 4 phases that the governor put in place, the CDC requirements, social distancing, et cetera, et cetera. I'm also working with the city administrator up in North Bend. We're trying to figure out, when it crosses, cross-jurisdictional, as far as if you give funding, we don't want people to double dip on funding. We want to be fair and equitable to everybody, give everybody a piece of the pie, if you will. And then, of course, what Chief Carrera has said, and then, working on the budget as well, and just moving that forward. So, yeah, I think that's enough for now. So that's just a quick update. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Rick. Councilmember Mayhew and Councilmember Holloway, I see your hands up, or Councilmember Holloway.
So can you advise us on the current status of the 4th of July permit? I believe there was a misfire and posting in social media, and I'd like to give opportunity to state exactly where we are and give council members involved time to retract their statements.
Thank you, Councilmember Holloway. I'll start, and then Chief Carrera can chime in as well. There was a misunderstanding, and an email went out that the event was canceled. My recollection of the meeting we had together was we were going to look for other options and try to see if there's something we could do. And we were going to meet sometime this week to discuss those options. And if they weren't viable options, then we would move to looking at canceling the whole event. However, we want to be very careful when we do that, and we want to exhaust everything. We want to make sure we're following protocol. So at this time, and like I said, the mayor and the chief can chime in as well. At this time, there hasn't been a final decision made on that particular event, and we're looking at options, all the options, before we make a final decision. The final decision was supposed to be made this week. Mayor, Chief, you have anything to add?
Yeah, I would just add that to let them know that we had a very detailed, lengthy internal staff meeting to which I invited Jeff Mehall, who's the principal organizer from Surf Snoqualmie that puts that together. I just have tremendous respect for what they've accomplished. As you recall, a few years back, we were facing taking on that event as ourselves as a city, which was a little daunting and overwhelming. And we were relieved when they took on that task. So I wanted to be very, I think they absolutely deserve our utmost courtesy and respect to involve them in that decision. So we, made sure to get Jeff on that internal meeting, and it was very helpful because I think it gave him a perspective on some of the concerns we had on some of the other ideas we were floating around, like maybe a drive-in observation of a fireworks show at the mill site. But many of the ideas we floated around just had really difficult scenarios and wrinkles to them every time we explored them in detail. And so where we left it with Jeff was to say, well, even he was conceding that it was looking rather grim and difficult to pull off, but could you give him another few days to go back with his team and do some more brainstorming on it? Hey, we're an innovative, creative community. See what you can come up with, and we'll circle the wagons back again this week and revisit that. Unfortunately, there was a little bit of crosswires internally in the staff where I think there was a perception that the decision had been made to cancel. That's when the notice went out, and we had to pull it back because suddenly Jeff and Surf Snoqualmie are going, hey, what's going on? I thought you guys committed to giving us one more shot before we all made a decision. So I see them as a big partner in that community celebration, and I want to be respectful of that partnership. And that's what we needed to retract and pull that back and reset. And we're going to touch base with them again this week and early this week, and then make a decision and go. Councilmember Sunwell.
Yeah, so I'm curious. I appreciate the city retracting that. I'm just curious if the council member who has posted it on social media is going to do the same. Been up for 4 days.
Yeah, I don't know. I'll leave it up to that council member. I frankly don't think a lot of people pay attention to those uncensored sites anyway, so it's not a huge concern to me. But Councilmember Mayhew.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that in this liaison role, just at the invitation of the mayor over the last week, I was able to attend a couple of the meetings, and it's one thing to hear from Chief Carrera, to hear from the mayor, the things they're doing. It's impressive just to hear, but I have to I think we all owe an incredible thanks to our staff. They are doing their jobs extremely well, and from what I observed, above and beyond. I think in our community is an amazing community. It really just hit me so hard that the involvement of all of these different organizations, the way that they're working together, the leadership role that our administration is playing, our staff members are playing with the community, but the way they're all working together to focus on our community and helping people who are in need. It's just it's overwhelming to me to watch it. I really have been moved by it, and I really think I would just share with you all, I think we've got a lot to be very proud of in how our city staff is functioning right now, and I just wanted to share that point of view, and a lot to be proud of our community.
Thank you, Councilmember Mayhew. All right. So if there's no other questions about just our updates in the last couple of weeks, that I believe that we had on here continuation of the budget roundtable, but I believe we were able to get through all the material tonight. So there's nothing, unless Robert, you had more you wanted to jump into it this time. If Robert is still there or unmuted. Robert, you're still muted.
Sorry, still figuring out the Zoom toggling. No, not at this time. We're going to come back on Thursday with Parks and Public Works and the City Attorney's Office.
Okay. Well, sorry to disappoint council, but that's all the business we have to for tonight. So I think there be no further business coming for the council. Entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All right, I have a motion and a second to adjourn tonight's meeting. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion is carried. Wanted to stay longer. Motion is carried. Everybody enjoy your evening. Thank you very much.